In the latest episode of Jobless Reincarnation, it is time for Rudy and Sylphie's wedding reception, and being that it's such a momentous occasion for both, naturally between them and their friends it leads to a few surprises and also someone being left in tears. So to begin with the recap, things for the planning of the wedding reception are rather simple. Rudy decides to get a new cloak. The invites are getting sent out, and while you would think this would be the perfect time for Paul and Rudy's siblings to come around, unfortunately Rudy thinks it's too short of a time span for them to get the letter, never mind respond, and it actually show up. So he decides to let his father be aware of everything, but not invite him over, even though, all things considered, Paul could have showed up late, got to be introduced to Sylphie, and considering how big the house is, him and his siblings could have lived very comfortably. But as Rudy implies, it's a big house, and they're still trying to adjust to the idea of having to fill up these rooms, buy enough food and everything beyond a wedding reception. And Rudy makes it clear that even though he was an adventurer for years, his money isn't what it used to be. And while Sylphie, being the type of partner she is, she's like, well, I've been holding on to all my earnings from Princess Ariel. It's one of those situations where he appreciates it, but I don't think he wants to go all out for this, especially because he's very much relying on assumptions on what he should be doing or shouldn't be doing, which leads to the whole party, and pretty much everything goes well, but there are a few minor situations that do raise an eyebrow a little bit. One of them is that after the main part of the party, Princess Ariel asks of Rudy to have a duel with Luke. And mind you, Luke just had a conversation with Rudy about, letting the past be the past, reconciling as family, and then here comes Princess asking them to duel, and Luke's whole identity is based off of being a noble, being a swordsman, and then you got Rudy, who's mostly been a mage, and while he's improved his swordsmanship, it's not necessarily his specialty. Yet, he whoops Luke's ass, and it isn't clear if he uses the eye that gives him a bit of foresight in order to win, or he just beats his behind just because he's better than him. But you can see it definitely humbled Luke, and while it didn't seem to mess up their relationship, it's definitely something that was a little bit embarrassing. But for Ariel, and maybe even Luke an extension, with having to kind of give away, for lack of a better term, Sylphie, this kind of confirms that Rudy can protect her and be a good husband to her. But it does kind of leave a sour note for Princess Ariel that Rudy's this powerful, but with Sylphie having a home, likely to have kids soon, the idea of her adventuring with them, never mind within a year or so, trying to help her take back the Kingdom of Asura, it doesn't seem likely. And of course, because Rudy, just in episode 12 of the season, felt like he owed the princess and I believe agreed to help them, it's kind of confusing why Princess Ariel would say that, but I guess she wants to provide both of them out so they don't feel obligated, rather than them, as it seems to be, them willingly showing up for her. But lest we forget, life hasn't been that easy for her in terms of where she could have been at to where she is, so maybe she wants to keep her expectations low just so that she doesn't end up disappointed. Which leads to the final topic of the recap, and that is Elenice and Sylphie having a conversation. Now, during the whole wedding planning stage, Elenice was somebody that Sylphie wanted to be there, and it wasn't necessarily clear why. Now, in some ways, considering how Rudy is sexually, it does push the idea that maybe Sylphie wanted some tips from the most sexual person she knows, never mind a fellow elf. But what Sylphie really wanted Elenice there for is because she was thinking that maybe that's her grandmother and she wasn't sure. And when Elenice and Cliff do like everybody else and greet the couple to be, one-on-one, give blessings, thanks and everything, both Elenice and Sylphie make that connection, and Elenice has a little bit of a breakdown. Mind you, it's nothing like catastrophic. She's not violent or completely loses her mind, but one of the things that Elenice's curse made her lose is her family and community, because it isn't clear how many children or how many people she slept with in the Great Forest where the elves come from, but it got bad enough to the point where any children she had, like Sophie's father-in-laws, once they were able to take care of themselves, she basically abandoned them. Or if it was just Laws, after he was able to take care of himself, she abandoned him. And it's not 100% clear how much that has weighed on her, because who knows how long Elenice is, how old Elenice is at this point, but clearly meeting her granddaughter, getting that sense that she's able to reconnect with family, not just continue to grow her chosen family, it hits her hard. But thankfully, between Rudy and Cliff, they know how to give both ladies space and also how to orchestrate them coming together as family. And seeing all this has it with Cliff is really ready to double down on curing Elenice of her curse, and he even decides to ask of Rudy to help him, since I won't say that Cliff hasn't made any progress, but clearly there's more that needs to be done that Cliff can't just do alone. So getting to the review portion, one of the things I really appreciate is that with this episode, it allowed us to see Sophie learn she still does have family out there, and also it gave Elenice a bit more backstory. For when you think about it, Elenice is somebody who, pretty much because of a curse, which is often downplayed because of the Ichi element, has had a hard time forging connections. A good part of the men she knows, she had to pay them off in order to not get jealous, possessive, or bring trouble to her life. And then in terms of everybody else, yes, she may have a relationship with Roxy, maybe even with Paul to a certain degree, but as she makes clear every time, Paul and I have a very complicated relationship. And in terms of Roxy, they're cool, they adventure together, but it could be like with most people in Elenice's life, their relationship is mainly based on a transaction, not from having a real personal relationship. So for her to discover her granddaughter, never mind her granddaughter being with Rudy, who she's bonded with, even though they never had relations to the point that I would say when it comes to Rudy and Elenice's relationship, it's sort of like a brother-sister relationship, even though Elenice is old enough to probably be Rudy's grandmother, if not great-grandmother, depending upon how old Elenice is. But setting that all aside, that was a beautiful thing to establish and see, especially her breaking down over it, because I don't think we've really seen Elenice get that emotional. So for her to break down to the point of being on her knees, and out of context that would sound so wrong, but anyway, for her to break down to the point of getting on her knees and kind of losing it a little bit, that was definitely a special moment. And then let's not forget, when it comes to Sylphie, because of how the mass transportation event was, she fell out of the sky into Princess Ariel's garden. And from there, she never got the opportunity to do like Rudy and potentially try to find her family. Instead, she dedicated herself to Princess Ariel, and she might have gotten a home, apparently a salary, and of course food and some form of protections, but she never got to seek out if her father's still alive or any family members that she had. So for this, just like how chosen family has been all Elenice has sort of been able to have, so is the case with Sylphie. So on top of getting a husband now, she now is reconnected with her grandmother, who her father didn't even get to know that well because he got abandoned. And it's not clear what's next for them as a family, but we can only hope that there'll be conversations about either the Great Forest, their family's history, so that as Sylphie moves forward in her relationship and marriage with Rudy, she could also kind of get some development in terms of her family's backstory and history as well, which could lead to Elenice's backstory continue to be fleshed out. Speaking of family and even chosen families, I think forever when it comes to the series, I'm going to appreciate and also compare where Rudy was in his past life to where Rudy is in his current. And it's just because how drastic things are. Rudy in his past life was isolated from his blood relations, had no friends, and now look at him having a relationship with his father, having paternal figures like Sonic, who may not showed up to his wedding reception, but likely had good reason. And then you add in all these friends who wanted to be invited and borderline demand to be part of his special moment. That's a major shift from where he was. And to add on to that, take Cliff. Cliff used to be a rival or not like Rudy because of all the compliments that Eris gave him. Yet now Cliff talks about Rudy like that's his big brother who he's so proud of, as he praises him for defeating Luke so easily. Then taking into consideration Bodyguardi in terms of him being this god who Rudy also fought with and defeated. And yet he's this joyous being who somehow comes in at the right time when Rudy's giving a speech, and when he sees that his friend is struggling, he cuts in, simplifies things for Rudy, who you can see is beginning to really get overwhelmed, and gives him a wink, letting him know he got him. Things like that may seem very small, but it really helps show you why Jobless Reincarnation, despite being an action show, despite being a fantasy, is also able to have these moments where it's not about taking advantage of dragons, elves, magic, and all swordplay, but it can also just show these relationships that aren't necessarily being built so that if someone dies off it matters, but have these relationships be built to show you that in worlds like this is not all about survival. People can thrive, people can love, people could have entire lives and just not have to worry about their next meal all the time. The last thing I want to highlight is Rudy and Sylphie's relationship, and that's just because whether you're talking about live action or even animated, I think Rudy and Sylphie's relationship is one of the best. There's a partnership there that isn't just pushed to be cute, give you butterflies, maybe even make you envious. There's also this functioning, loving, look out for one another type of relationship. Monetarily, Rudy recognizes that he maybe has been spending too much in order to live up to this, what he needs to do as a husband, and the fact that Sylphie decided to say, my money is yours, my money, I've seen all you've done in order to get to this far, let me take us over the finish line, was a beautiful thing. Add in that she was talking about cooking for him and really is helping to make this place a home, and even something as small as help him pick out a new cloak. It shows that this isn't just about grand gestures and major moments that can be made into memes or whatever. It's also about those little moments that add up that make it so you can recognize that this is a couple and not just two people paired together, because it can lead to a bunch of cute moments. And I would even add on when it comes to the whole Princess Ariel thing. Rudy knows Sylphie adores and is loyal to Princess Ariel. So him not even questioning the idea that if Sylphie decided to go, he would just tag along too, I think is also very important, because it shows whether we're talking about their lives as a couple or their lives professionally, it seems both are willing and able to support each other. Overall, it isn't clear what Rudy's next chapter is going to be at this point, especially as we watch his personal life catch up to where he is professionally and also his education. But there's no denying that this is definitely the calm before some kind of storm. And between his defense and offense, it seems Rudy has built the community, the relationships, even his other abilities like his strength and everything to not only weather the storm, but potentially have it do minimal damage to what he has built so far in his life.